Hi, it's Paul, and I'm going to welcome you to an introduction to hiring assessments. In this short video, I'm going to introduce you to hiring assessments and the different types there are. And this is based on my 12 years of experience. I've been working in the industry for a long time, been doing a lot of speaking at Sherman and other events, and this kind of condenses it down into just a few minutes for people who just want to get started. So let's define it. An assessment is a process to gather information related to the ability to perform a job. Now, there's all kinds of assessments, from the traditional interview to skills and abilities tests to demonstrations and simulations, and finally there's the automated psychometric. So let's just talk through these a minute, and then we'll get into the one you're probably here for, which is the automated psychometric. You know, an interview is an assessment. It's an attempt to figure out how well somebody's likely to perform in a job. And there's lots of pluses and minuses to it. It's still an incredibly important part of the hiring process. Then there are skills and abilities tests, which determine can you do a specific task. Then there are the demonstrations and simulations, and these are a growing portion of how assessments are done, how information is gathered. A good example of this is Google used to give sometimes as many as 14 interviews in an attempt to determine how well somebody will perform, but they found out that one of the most important things they can do is actually give them part of the work task to do during the interview, and then have the results of that work task evaluated by their top performers. So if you're being hired to be a coder for Google, they're going to ask you to write some code during the interview. And so it's a way, it's an assessment, it's an important way that they seek to find out your ability to perform the job. Now, most of us don't have the ability to do that. So automated psychometric assessments have been developed over a period of years, and you can watch my video about the history of them if you're into that sort of thing, but they've been developed, and technology and psychology have been merged into these online tools which allow us to help get some better ideas as to who's likely to be successful in a job. Now, there are three major types of assessments. The first kind is what's called EPSA. Now, an EPSA test measures what you are, but it doesn't compare you to anything. So in other words, a common type of EPSA test is the DISC profile. It says, I am a D, I am an I, or S, a C, or a combination of those, but it doesn't tell how much, and it doesn't compare me to anything in particular. And so this makes this type of test useful for coaching and development, but not for hiring. In order to be valid for hiring, we have to have a test that's compared to a fixed population so that we have a standard that we're comparing them to, not just saying, oh, you're a D, I'll hire you. There's lots of evidence that says that this is not a good predictor of success in a job. Now, the second type is what's called a normative test, and this is primarily the kind that are used for hiring. A normative test compares a candidate to a fixed population, usually the working population in the United States. So, for example, an EPSA test will say you are highly social, and normative test will say how social you are compared to the fixed standards. So, in my case, compared to the population of the United States, I'm 2 on a scale of 10, which means that I tend to prefer to work by myself. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, doesn't mean I can't do a job, but it means that I'll do better in certain kinds of jobs where I don't have to be out networking and socializing a lot. Whereas somebody who is more on the 7, 8, 9 range is going to prefer a different type of job. Now, we don't just know whether I'm sociable or not, we know how sociable I am compared to a fixed population, and that's the key to success in hiring. And then the last type are the skills and abilities tests, and these are very useful for certain types of jobs. If you need to know if somebody is proficient at Excel, you can give them a skills test, which is basically like the tests you took in high school or college where they get graded, and how many answers did you get right, how many did you get wrong, and it gives an estimate of your ability to perform that particular skill. And there's thousands of these available, from computer coding to networking to making change, all kinds of skills and abilities tests. So these three are the major types of assessments in the marketplace today. So let me give you some insight into why you might consider using an automated psychometric test. Now, first of all, they're developed by experts, so you don't have to be an expert. If you use a skills test, it's developed by an expert. If you use a normed test to figure out how sociable I am, because that's an important characteristic of this job, the questions are developed by experts and tested to make sure that they actually measure what they say they measure. The second reason is it gathers information in a structured manner. Most hiring processes are very subjective. And when you use an automated psychometric test and add that into your process, it doesn't replace what you're doing now. It adds to it and gives you highly structured data. In a typical test, somebody might answer 200 questions, but everybody's answering the same 200 questions. So you're gathering structured information, and the results are compared to a normed sample. The third thing is that it allows you to obtain information that you might not be able to get any other way. A good example of this is cognitive ability. How do I process information? Will I be able to learn at a sufficient rate to be able to learn the needs of this job? I was working with a company that sells large earth-moving equipment, and this was absolutely the #1 factor, because they would put people into their training program, into their sales program, which takes over a year before they can put them out on the field to actually sell this. And most of them failed because they weren't able to learn the complexity of what's involved in selling that equipment. So this is an important factor, cognitive ability, and there's lots of other things that people don't even know the true answers. If you say to me, how sociable am I? I'd probably say, I'm sociable because I am. It's not like I don't like people. It's just that I recharge by being by myself, and I prefer to work by myself. But I have no point of reference for answering that question. So you want to gather that information in a structured manner. The fourth thing is there can be a cross-check between answers to help detect distortion. It's not usually that people are trying to lie, although there are lots of studies that show the statistics on this, and I think I've got a video coming up on that. It's not necessarily that. It's that people are not sure, and so they give inconsistent answers. And a properly designed test will help to detect this. And then the fifth reason why you might want to use one of these automated psychometric tests is because it reduces subjectivity and bias. And we have a whole tendency to like people who are like ourselves, and there's lots of studies on this. I've got another video about this. It's called the halo and horns effect. It's just natural that we instinctively like people who are like us, and then it clouds the questions we ask and the way we interpret the answers that come from there. So a properly designed test can overcome this. So these are 5 good reasons why you might want to consider adding an assessment into your process, a structured, automated psychometric assessment into your process. Doesn't take the place of what you're doing now, but it adds structured digital data, objective data into your process. So what's the assessment market look like? Well, I think there's about 500, as near as I can tell, there's about 500 assessments in the marketplace. It's crowded, there's inconsistent quality. Everybody says they're validated, but the question is validated against what? And what does that mean? How is that interpreted? And is it legally defensible? And I've got a video again about validation of assessments, a very important subject that you need to be aware of. And then the last thing is they're very similar. And so it's hard to tell. If you're going on the marketplace and just looking around, in fact, you may have gotten to this video by a Google search or a YouTube search or something like that, and you're looking for answers. But the problem is that everything seems to be the same, and to the untrained person, it can be difficult to make the selection. So the bottom line is I'm here to help. If I can be of any help, I will help you evaluate your current situation and determine whether an assessment can add value into your process. And if it can't, that's fine. I never charge for consulting, but I'll be glad to help you evaluate what you're doing now and whether an automated psychometric assessment might be able to help you improve your process, because the cost of failure and mistakes is high. Even the cost of hiring somebody who's less than a top producer can be very high. I'm here to help. Let me know if you'd like to talk, and I look forward to talking to you sometime soon.